There's really something to be said about seeing results from consistent use that are without pain. I don't like this notion that women have been fed that beauty is pain, that you have to zap yourself or peel your skin raw and have downtime to recover enough to then go out in public. I mean, what is that? You shouldn't have to, take days off from certain ingredients in your skincare to let your skin recover from them. Think about that. Would you tell a child to do that? No. Why is that okay for us? It's not.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. The skincare industry is worth around $163.5 billion globally. As women, we are marketed to heavily by the beauty industry. They know which buttons to push, which insecurities lead us to pay for more products and procedures. Sometimes it's good to stop and ask yourself why you're following your current beauty routine and who influenced how you think about your skin. Ultimately, you have the power over your own body. And remember, you're already beautiful. You always have been. Unfortunately, the exfoliating, cleansing, and other skincare practices you've been taught may be outdated or creating more harm than good. None of us want to look older than we are, but when it comes to our beauty practices around aging in particular, we've been fed many half-truths and some damaging myths. So I've asked today's guest to come on the podcast to bust these myths and share tips to update your skincare routine so it's working for you rather than against you. My guest today is Rachael Pontillo, who is a holistic skincare formulator, best-selling author, healthy skin media expert, and licensed esthetician. She teaches skincare makers, founders, and practitioners to create and market innovative plant-based formulations. She also offers integrative skin wellness training and certification to beauty and wellness experts. Rachael's wisdom around skin aligns so well with my own. You may have noticed blogs and videos created by her on the Spa Doctor website or on our social media channels. I'm very grateful for her feedback and support in the chapters in both of my books around DIY skincare as well. In today's interview, we bust common myths around skincare and aging, including around popular ingredients like vitamin C and retinoids, how these and common skincare practices may actually damage rather than help the skin. Some of this will likely surprise you because the benefits of many of these so-called active ingredients and anti-aging procedures have been somewhat misleading. And we talk about which ingredients and practices support healthy skin and graceful aging. This and much more on today's episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast. Rachael, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we are going to bust a lot of myths today about anti-aging skincare products and a lot of the marketing myths. And as you know, you and I have been in this industry for a while now. And with my background being a naturopathic physician and making skincare products, I've definitely learned a lot about the marketing hype and how companies market so much around anti-aging. And so, first of all, I just can't stand the term anti-aging.
I know. I feel like it just needs to not exist because, honestly, it's the most unattainable thing that there is. I mean, if you're not aging, then you're dying, as we all know. I mean, we age. It's forward progression of human life. We all do it. We can't undo it. Yes, there are ways that we can do so in a more healthful and happy and higher quality of life way, but that doesn't mean that we try to undo that process or halt that process. And I think that it's time that we stop using that messaging because it's harmful. It's harmful to women of all ages, but especially, I would say, younger women who are feeling this pressure to stop something before it starts that they can never actually stop.
Yeah, it's amazing hearing women in their 20s already talking about doing Botox and using anti-aging skincare products and things when I didn't even really start thinking about any of that until I was 40. I mean, like I was like, when I turned 40, I was looking in the mirror. I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to start thinking about skincare products and what I use. But I didn't even think about it before then. So to me, it's pretty surprising to see how early it's happening. And I think so much of it is pressures from marketing. But while we could
Social
go on
media.
and on about that, we also want to talk about skincare products. And even with the marketing aside, what's actually in these so-called anti-aging creams and treatments and things, they can actually create more harm than good.
Yeah. And I really want to bring attention to this whole, it's like this trifecta of anti-aging ingredients. You have like the vitamin C, you have the retinol, you have the hyaluronic acid. And it never ceases to amaze me when I see a new product come onto the market and they're like, we have this, this, and this. I'm like, yeah, so does everybody else. Like there's nothing new about it. And I have heard many dermatologists defend these ingredients like to the ground because there's so much research behind it. Fine, there's research behind it. But number one, it doesn't mean that it's like research on human beings. It's often in vitro research that is not necessarily translatable to regular product usage in everyday life, or it's animal research, which also cannot be translated to human use under everyday living situations. So just because those ingredients happen to be studied, it does not mean that they're good for people to be using on a daily or a twice daily basis. And in many cases, those ingredients bring inflammation and free radicals into those upper layers of the skin, which then can actually have an opposite effect where it actually can speed up that aging process because it just keeps that inflammatory and wound healing process in overdrive, and it does not allow it ever to kind of settle back down to homeostasis where the skin can just be. So that's really one of the biggest myths that I want to bust about anti-aging ingredients, that you do not need to buy these fancy serums and treatments that have multiple types of retinol and different types of vitamin C and hyaluronic acid and peptides and stem cells and all these other things. Because if you live well, right, you prioritize healthy living, you eat well, you sleep well, you move well, you focus on positive things in your mind and in your life, and you use products that are made with actual nutrients instead of, water, then maybe an emollient, maybe an emulsifier, and then we throw a few actives in there for good measure. That's really what it's about, is focusing on that quality over quantity. And when you do that, you don't need those quote unquote actives, because the fact that they have to be manipulated so much and processed so much to even get to a size that they can penetrate, and then they have to be preserved so strongly so that by the time you get them, sometimes 3 to 5 years after they were manufactured, that's not great. There's nothing fresh about it. There's nothing about it that is going to get into the skin, and your skin's going to be like, oh, this is what I need, because the skin doesn't take in nutrients like that. It takes in nutrients from the food you eat. So,
yeah. Thank you. I know that you and I speak the same language on this. And I think it's so important for us to be really looking at what we do from the inside out and not just relying upon what we put on our skin. But of course, what we put on our skin is important. And
it is important.
And so as so much as what we look at, okay, we want some natural ingredients. We want to stay away from these toxic ingredients that we talk so much about. But yet, what are the ingredients that are in there? So there are the things to avoid, but what do we want in our skincare products? And so I think a lot of times we talk these days about, a lot of podcasts that I'm on, people ask me what should not be in products, but I think we should also talk about what should be in them. And so, and I know some people contact my company, the spa doctor, they ask, so do you guys have a vitamin C serum? And we say, well, there's vitamin C in our products, but it's naturally occurring because it's part of the plant. And ingredients that we use are rich in vitamin C and vitamin E and vitamin A and the nutrients that your skin needs. But people just it's almost like they can't even hear that because they're so used to hearing, oh, but your products have to contain vitamin C. But let's just talk about vitamin C for a moment and the stability of it and the problems with it, because I think if people sometimes will just see vitamin C on the label and they'll think, oh, okay, great, my product has vitamin C. And then they don't even ask any other questions.
Yeah, it's really good to talk about it because it is such a popular ingredient, and it's an ingredient that from a formulation standpoint is really tricky to work with, because the most pure form of vitamin C is going to be your L-ascorbic acid or your ascorbic acid. That is a water-soluble nutrient, okay? That is not going to be something that the skin takes in easily because our skin's barrier is primarily a lipid matrix. It's meant to keep things out. So anything that is water soluble is going to have a harder time getting in on its own. And vitamin C on top of that is also, it's highly unstable. It oxidizes very quickly. So when you put an ascorbic acid product on the skin, it's going to oxidize and cause problems, because when something oxidizes, you are then introducing those free radicals into the outermost layers of the skin, which are pro-inflammatory. That's going to happen before it can even get absorbed. So I don't love using ascorbic acid in products. There are other forms. There's ascorbyl palmitate, which is your ester C, which is both fat and water soluble, which in theory makes more sense. And yes, it is less inflammatory because it is able to penetrate into those deeper layers. But the problem is that it's not as bioavailable, and it's also not as active. It doesn't do what it's purported to do. So sure, it can be in a product, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to be recognized by your skin's receptors to be able to utilize that ingredient the way they market it to be utilized. And then there's magnesium ascorbyl phosphate. And then there's another one that starts with tetradecyl something or other. It's like a very long chemical word, that are synthetic vitamin C types that are known to penetrate a bit deeper, and they're supposed to be less inflammatory. But that's when we start to look at it as, okay, like, is this skin care as in nutrients, or is this a lab experiment going on our faces where these ingredients have been synthesized and they haven't really been around long enough to know, like, okay, what is the long-term effect of this, especially when you look at what else is formulated with, what else is going on in the skin. So I am right with you that I would much rather focus on plants that are rich in vitamin C, both in my diet as well as in my topical products. There are so many beautiful ingredients that we can use in the form of an extract or, a glycerin, a tincture, to get those nutrients into the product in a way that the skin actually recognizes as food more than it would a cluster of different molecules that have been synthesized.
Right. And then when it's synthesized to a certain point, is it really natural anymore? It's called vitamin C, but is that misleading to the public of it actually being a natural product?
Yeah. And that's a really good question, because we think of vitamins as natural, but if they are completely synthesized in a lab from nothing natural, then is it really the same thing? And I don't remember when this discussion happened, but I remember interviewing a doctor that was talking about supplements years ago, supplements versus whole foods. And the analogy was that if you have like a puzzle, and sometimes you have a puzzle piece and you see a spot that looks like that puzzle piece should fit, and you're like jamming it in there. You're like, why won't this fit? Why won't this fit? And there's like something just a hair off, that the puzzle piece just doesn't fit. And that's kind of what happens with these synthetic nutrients, is that it looks like the same nutrient found in nature. It's molecularly very similar, but because it doesn't have the coenzymes and cofactors along with it that the body recognizes and utilizes synergistically, and it's also missing, life force energy. It's missing that essence. It's missing those energetics. It's kind of that same thing, that you're trying to jam in this puzzle piece into a spot that doesn't quite fit, even though it looks like it should to the eye. That's really kind of how it works with these synthetic isolates. And that's why I really prefer to not formulate products that way. And I think something that you actually mentioned when we did the Herbal Skincare Summit years ago was when you use nutrients from plants and you're focusing on just adding plants into the product that are rich in those nutrients, nature knows how to make sure that you're not getting more than you can handle. It keeps itself in check. That's how plants work with people. And when you're overloading a product with retinol, but you're putting a lot in it because you know it's not going to all absorb. So you're jamming it in so that some of it absorbs. Okay, but then what happens to the rest? Usually causes some sort of inflammation. So this is why I really want to encourage people to not be swayed by those buzzwords on the bottles and in the marketing and on the social media, because it's not necessarily what's best for our skin, especially during times of life when there is a lot of change happening, whether that's hormonal or environmental. If our skin is already showing us, hey, something is changing, something is happening, I'm in flux, I'm adjusting. The last thing you want to do is overload it with a bunch of synthetics that could, quite frankly, be very overwhelming and overstimulating, which could cause more damage than good.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about how they can be inflammatory. But before we talk about some of these other ingredients, what are some of the ones that the ingredients that you do like that are rich in vitamin C that you think people should look for?
Okay. So I'm a huge fan of rose hips and rose petals. I love a good rose infusion, rose hydrosol. You're not going to get the vitamin C in rose hip oil because, again, it's water soluble, but you can. There are so many beautiful rose and rose hip extracts that you can find in skincare that are very high in natural vitamin C, as well as some of the citrus extract that we have available. But aside from that, berries are really high in vitamin C. So we see a lot of blueberry extracts, bilberry in products that are intended for skin brightening. That's something that can be looked at. They're also really rich in vitamin C, in addition to strawberries, raspberries. So I like to look at fruit extracts like that, because that is where you're going to get that water soluble vitamin C. And then you want to just make sure that you have enough oil in your regimen or in the product itself so that it can push that water soluble material into those layers and kind of seal it in so that it doesn't just evaporate out.
Yeah, love all those ingredients. Fantastic. We use some of those at Spa Doctor as well. So, and then let's talk about retinol like a little bit. Yeah. And so what are some of the problems with it? Because I know a lot of people, and that's another one people ask us about that. Do any of your products contain that? And we're like, well, it comes with some risk. So there's vitamin A rich oils that we use, plant-based oils that we use in our product. So we feel like we're covered there. But what do you think about these ingredients?
So retinol is another one that there are many different forms. There is your basic, retinol that you kind of see, that's your run-of-the-mill retinol palmitate. That's something that for many people is just irritant. It's actually been banned by some of the ingredient safety websites because it's so known to cause irritant and allergic reactions. But what it does is it does have a sloughing effect on the skin where it causes exfoliation before maybe those cells are ready to naturally fall off. And when we force exfoliation, what that does is it exposes cells that are not fully developed yet to the elements, which it's almost like, if you were to peel off sunburn too soon and there's that raw skin underneath that hasn't quite healed yet. That's essentially what happens when you force exfoliation. And if you're using a retinol product every day, that's essentially what you're doing. And when you're exfoliating, you're not honoring that barrier function, that those cells are there for a reason, for protection, and that they, even though they're quote unquote dead, they are still there for a reason. The skin was designed pretty brilliantly, and nature knows, the body knows when to let go of those cells. And that happens naturally. It doesn't have to be forced. So there are other metabolites of vitamin A. There's retinaldehyde, there's retinol propionate. There are other forms that are precursors to retinol, which the theory of using those is that the skin is supposed to be able to store what it doesn't utilize right away and then convert it to usable vitamin A when it needs to. That theory in nature is more about the fact that the epidermal layers do store carotenoid antioxidants, which are specific antioxidants that then convert to vitamin A when it's signaled to by the body's processes. But again, that's referring to natural precursors to vitamin A, which would be your provitamin A carotenoid antioxidants like beta carotene, which is what you would see in your beautiful, vibrant orange and red oils like your sea buckthorn oil, your rosehip oil. And then some other oils as well are high in carotenoid antioxidants, even if they don't have that bright color. The skin knows what to do with those, is able to store what it needs, which actually helps to make the skin more resilient against environmental damage. It also helps with even pigmentation, and then it converts it when it's needed. Whereas if we are synthesizing these synthetic precursors, again, it's back to that puzzle piece analogy where the skin, if it recognized it, it could store it and then convert it, but it's not necessarily always able to do that because a lot of these ingredients are also quite unstable. And by the time they get pumped out in a consumer's hand after being transported and stored and warehoused for years in their supply chain, by the time you get that ingredient, it's going to have degraded to an extent where if its efficaciousness is actually questionable. Whereas if we are focusing on botanical skincare that has been made in smaller batches, has a much shorter supply chain, it's getting to the consumer faster, that is something that is going to be more efficacious than something that has been just mass produced in these huge quantities. And then by the time it gets to you, what good is it actually?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, those are, you made so many great points there. And I think that, I do think that sometimes people forget that skincare products do have an expiration date. So just to remind people, like if you've had a product for a long time, toss it out. Not only is it not going to be as effective, but it may actually, the oils may be oxidized. It may be rancid. It could be actually creating more harm. So yeah, be aware of that. And natural products typically have a shorter shelf life than.
Right. We have to make them more often because we want them to be fresh, and because if we use strong preservatives, it can potentially kill some of the beneficial qualities of the product. So natural formulation is not something that the mass-produced industry has really caught on to yet, because it is a process that is a little bit more nuanced. It does require, it is more expensive because it requires more labor, and it does require smaller batches. But those of us who do it and love it and know the benefits, we feel it's worth it. And our customers who benefit from us being passionate about it, they appreciate it too, because they see the difference. And there's really something to be said about seeing results from consistent use that are without pain. I don't like this notion that women have been fed that beauty is pain, that you have to zap yourself or peel your skin raw and have downtime to recover enough to then go out in public. I mean, what is that? You shouldn't have to, take days off from certain ingredients in your skincare to let your skin recover from them. Think about that. Would you tell a child to do that? No. Why is that okay for us? It's not.
That's a really good point. We've been fed a lot as women. We've been fed a lot of myths and bought into some stuff, on very unfortunate stuff over the years. We've talked a lot about that in the Hormones, Health and Harmony documentary series about what we've been told about our health and our hormones and our rights and, all of these kinds of things. But when it comes to skincare and beauty regimens and all of that, I think that's true as well. So, well, let's talk about, you talked about exfoliation is one of those examples of like people can overdo it. I think we are starting to get back into, there's more research about the skin microbiome and the importance of keeping the skin microbiome intact and nourishing the skin microbiome. And hopefully we'll see more shifts in that overall with skincare manufacturers, as well as procedures and, medi spas and things like that. But right now that's still like the popular trend is just like so much exfoliation.
Right.
So but there is a point where exfoliation is important. Skin cell turnover is important. So what do you think is the right balance for exfoliation?
I think it definitely depends on every person's individual makeup. Our skin is very individual. Our needs are very individual.
And
I think it also
with our age too.
They change with our age, and it is affected by the seasons, as I know you've written about in your most recent book about how making simple changes throughout the seasons can help us keep, beautiful skin year round. There are times of the year when the skin naturally lets things go. It expands, it releases, it sweats more, it detoxes more naturally. Like in the warmer seasons, in the warmer climates, it's all about getting things out. So during those times of the year, I don't think we really need to help the skin out all that much because it's already doing that naturally. And a lot of people don't realize this, that the most important catalyst for encouraging a regular cell turnover rate and natural exfoliation is water, natural hydration. Water is the catalyst that causes that natural enzymatic action to digest and release those proteins that are those corneocytes that are ready to fall off. So in the summertime, when we are sweating more, when we are probably drinking more water, hopefully to replenish what we lose through sweat, that's why we do see naturally more exfoliation. And I also want to say that if we force exfoliation during the summer, we do risk our skin being more susceptible to sun damage because then we've taken away that armor. And it doesn't really make sense to do a harsh exfoliation and use exfoliating ingredients like retinol and vitamin C and then put sunscreen on top of that and think that that's fine. It just kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like canceling each other out. So if you are going to do exfoliation, I would say towards the end of like the winter is more of a time to do that because the body tends to want to pull in and not release. It wants to hold on to things for protection, to protect from that colder, drier weather. And then towards the end of that, once it starts to then become spring again and the weather starts to warm up, we sometimes get some accumulation where it might be helpful do an exfoliation treatment. But I would say, it also depends on how sensitive your skin is, how dry your skin is. If you're somebody who has sensitivity and your skin is irritated and red and it hurts to smile or make expressions, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you probably don't need much exfoliation because you don't want to add friction to skin that's already really sensitive and maybe a little bit angry. That kind of skin needs to be soothed and sometimes cooled. So we want to really focus on doing that. But some people do have skin that is a bit more resilient, that might also be a bit more clog prone. So in that case, sometimes a weekly or twice monthly exfoliation treatment before a mask or something like that might be appropriate. In one of my courses, I call them love your skin dates, which are the times of week or the times of month where you give yourself a little extra time in your skincare ritual to do those extras like a nice exfoliation treatment, whether it's something gentle like honey tapping or a very gentle scrub, and then some sort of a mask on top of that where you're giving a little extra in your routine other than your day-to-day.
Yeah, great. And then do you have any exfoliating ingredients that you think are particularly good? And then also kind of curious what you think about brushes and different devices and things.
Okay. So I'm a big fan of honey, raw honey. And I like to do that honey tapping ritual where you kind of slather raw honey on your face, let it sit for a couple minutes before it gets tacky. And then you just tap all around and let that stickiness pull out whatever needs to come out. And then it just washes off really easily with warm water, melts right away. But I do realize some people like the feeling of a scrub. Jojoba beads are really nice because they are soft. They don't have jagged edges. So that's one type of exfoliant that I think is okay. Honey beads also are good because they will melt when they're kind of done. So once they melt, then they're done. For the body, the skin on the arms and the legs is a little bit thicker than on the face. You have more stratum corneum layers. You have more of those cells there. And there is a benefit, I think, to dry brushing and to doing body scrubs, because you want to make sure that you're keeping the follicles clear. That way, sweating is not interfered with. It also helps to avoid things like keratosis pilaris or clogged follicles, which can lead to bumpy skin. But doing regular dry brushing is also really great, not just for exfoliation, but also for lymphatic support, which helps the body detox itself on a regular basis. So I'm fine with dry brushes when it comes to body exfoliation, but I'm not a fan of brushes on the face. I know that I think Clarisonic, they actually stopped manufacturing it. And I know that there are a lot of copies, and some of them say that they're more gentle. But honestly, like when I think of a spinning brush, that's what I think of like using to clean dirty grout, like on my tile in my
Or
bathroom.
maybe like your heels.
Yes, I don't want that on my sensitive, delicate facial skin. And like nobody's skin is that dirty where that's necessary. It's just not. I mean, really. So I think that we have also been taught by the industry that we are dirtier than we really are. Most people over cleanse, and that can also affect the skin's microbiome because it alters our body's pH. And many of the microbiota that live on the skin's surface need to feed on the oils that are in our skin's lipid matrix. And when you remove that, then it removes that food and that habitat for those microbes. So it's like, oh, where's my food? There's nothing here. So that's when we can actually create a dysbiosis on the skin, which is not great for us because we want to have biodiversity in the population of our microbes on the surface of our skin as well as inside the body.
Yeah, that is so well said. And I mean, I think that we have gotten these overzealous hygiene practices, and that we got to come back to a balance on it. Yes, we want to be clean. We want to smell fresh, and we want to feel fresh and clean and all of those things. And we want to have good hygiene, but not go overboard where it actually damages our skin microbiome. And whether you currently have healthy skin or you have skin issues, you want to get your skin into this healthy place. And so creating a balance with that. And thank you for bringing up cleansing, because that's one of the things I say. The two biggest skincare mistakes I feel people make are having to do with exfoliating and cleansing. And
Yes.
I think,
less is more.
Yeah. Yes. And so when it comes to cleansing the skin, and those oils in the skin, like you mentioned, that are naturally present, that so many people feel like, oh, my skin is oily. Ooh, I've got to get rid of that oil.
Yeah.
And then those of us that tend to have more dry skin are like, how can I get more oil in my skin?
Right.
And so, we have, as you know, one of our products is 100% plant-based oils. And we have some people are like, oh, well, I have oily skin, so I can't use that.
Right.
And so we always constantly have to educate people like, actually, no, your skin, even oily skin can benefit from oil. You just need the right kinds and the right balance.
Yes, the right balance.
Anything that you want to add around oils for skin?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that every plant oil is very unique. Even though many of them share similar fatty acid compositions, a lot of them have something special and unique about them that you can only find in that plant or in that oil. And that is what makes it so unique. So I firmly believe that there is an oil or an oil blend for everyone. You might have to experiment to see which ones work for you. I would say, a good rule of thumb, if you're someone that has oilier skin, or if you're more prone to congestion or acneic breakouts, you're going to want to look for something that's a bit lighter weight, less saturated, that absorbs quickly, does not stay on the skin too long. So something like a rosehip seed oil or a hemp seed oil would be a nice one to try in that regard. Raspberry seed oil is another one that's great for oilier skin because it does dry. It does have a drying effect. And then if you're someone who has drier skin that tends to maybe show more signs of dehydration, like lines, or you actually have physical pain when you make facial expressions because you don't have enough moisture, you don't have enough water or oil, you might need something that is a little bit more saturated, that gives you a little bit more emollient protection and essentially acts as another barrier to add to the barrier that you already have. It'll add additional lipid protection. So something that is a bit more saturated, like a poppy seed oil or sesame oil or something that is like a solid butter, like a shea butter or mango butter or something like that might be more appropriate. And then depending on the season, if you have dry skin and it's wintertime, you really want to be thinking about those more saturated oils and butters for that extra protection. And then in the summertime, when there's maybe more humidity in the air and there's a little bit more hydration naturally in your skin and it doesn't feel as dry and irritated and tight, then you can maybe use something that's a little bit more lightweight. So you want to think about your skin, what it does naturally, what your skin type is and how it behaves. And then think about, okay, well, what is the climate right now? What is the air? Is the air naturally cold and dry right now or warm and dry where it's pulling water out of my skin? If so, maybe I need some extra oil or extra butter on there to seal that hydration in. Or do I live in the tropics where it's, humid all the time and there's just like water vapor everywhere? Well, in that case, you probably don't need as much protection. So kind of looking at those individual factors, I think is really helpful.
Great. Thank you. And I know we talked right from the beginning, we talked about busting myths around anti-aging. Yes. So how do these things that we've been talking about, how do they help with more graceful aging? If we're getting rid of the term anti-aging, replace it with like graceful aging, because we're all getting older, right? But let's do it gracefully. Right. And so what are some of the benefits of the things that we've talked about today when it comes to aging and like changes with when we go through hormonal changes, like during perimenopause, menopause? What are some of the things that we can benefit from these things that we've discussed?
I think the first thing is that it lets us give ourselves a break. It takes away that pressure of having to conform to something that maybe we would have been more able to conform to when we were 25. But releasing that pressure to have to look a certain way, I think can be very empowering, and it can help us then prioritize our energy on other areas of our health that might need more attention at that time. But I really am appreciating so many celebrities that are speaking out against this whole anti-aging movement and that are either sharing why they choose not to have injections and surgeries and whatnot, or if they have had them in the past, they're saying why they didn't like that and why they are choosing to not do that in the future. And I think it was, my goodness, I want to say it was Cameron Diaz, but it might've been like Julia Roberts. A bunch of them have been talking about it. But one of them said, I would rather look in the mirror and see my face looking back at me than a face that I don't recognize, than someone else's face. And I think there is a lot of power in that self-acceptance and in understanding that there is nothing negative associated with aging. That doesn't mean we want to speed up certain things. It doesn't mean that we want to see age spots or lines and wrinkles earlier than would be appropriate to do so. But I think that there's a lot we can do to reframe what we see in the mirror once we understand that we have negative connotations because we've been taught to, not because it is negative. So I think it's helpful to look and think of positive experiences or memories that might be associated with some of those symptoms. So, I'm 45. When I smile, I have smile lines. Well, I'm smiling because I'm happy. That's a good thing. Why would I want to do something to not look happy? I mean, just simple things like that, I think, can be really helpful in helping us navigate these changes in life. And I also think that it can feel really empowering to just say, no, I am not doing that anymore. Who am I doing that for? I think is a really good question to ask if you're someone who feels pressure. Why do you feel that you have to do certain things to your skin or use certain ingredients? For who? Who cares? Who is this for? And then really check in with yourself and say, I don't feel good doing this. This hurts, or this is expensive or uncomfortable. Therefore, I don't feel that I need to do this. I think giving ourselves permission to say no is very powerful. And then on the other hand, if you are someone who enjoys that part of the industry, I'm not here to tell you to not do what makes you feel good, but I always encourage women to check in with themselves and really ask, who am I doing this for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for pointing that out. And I think that there's so much we can do to that helps support our bodies overall and the innate wisdom of our bodies, that we don't have to just turn to these procedures. And of course, like you and I don't believe in shaming people for whatever decision they make.
But you do you.
Yeah, you do you. But yeah, I think it's important of understanding, why, what's your why? Why are you doing this? And are you, like you said, and so much of what we have discussed today helps with graceful aging, right? If you're cleansing without stripping the oils off your skin, and because those natural oils in the skin keep our skin looking younger longer. Yes. And if you're using plant-based oils and ingredients and extracts that have naturally containing antioxidants, that wars off against oxidative damage. And if you're not over exfoliating, but yet you're gently exfoliating, properly, and you're supporting your skin microbiome. Their skin microbiome is a big part of what helps us age gracefully, right? Absolutely. I mean, these are all things that we can do to naturally support our skin, because when we're doing a lot of work to take care of the inside, right? We're eating healthy, we're exercising, we're doing yoga and mindfulness practices, all these things. We also want our skin to keep up with us as we live to 100 and beyond, right?
Absolutely. And, I think our skincare is a great way to reward ourselves for all that other hard work we do, because it should feel good. It should feel like you are pampering yourself every day. There is so much love in touch. And when you bring in all that love from the plants and you do that as part of your daily routine, I do think it's a great way to show yourself appreciation for everything else you're already doing to live a high quality life.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Rachel. I know you and I could talk forever. So
I know.
We're going to wrap it up. Tell everyone where they can learn more about you and all the things that you have going on right now.
Yeah. So I have 2 websites that have blogs that have a ton of information about holistic skincare and ingredients at createyourskincare.com and skinwellnesspro.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Rachael Pontillo.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate all your information today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast, be sure to share it with the women in your life and rate and review the show. And to learn all about balancing your hormones, join us for the Hormones, Health, and Harmony 9-part documentary series at hormoneseries.com.